A lot of the insurance carriers still run a very analog claims process. 25 years ago and today at many carriers, an adjuster is a switchboard operator, and they have a document management system, a text message system, an email system, a claims management system, and it's kind of a mess.
You have as much experience on the claims side as probably anybody I know. Claims is everywhere, right? And I would say claims is really hot right now when it comes to the insurtech space.
We've come out of a very hard market. What drove this hard market, among other things, was inflation and loss costs going up. And the way to impact that the most is better claims operations. And the best carriers in the world have some of the best claims operations in the world.
You mentioned that brokers and agents haven't paid enough attention to claims. What does that mean?
The large and best brokers and agents certainly have great risk management functions, but really focusing those risk management functions on their carriers, with their carriers, partnering with claims to get to better outcomes is not a spot that the industry spent a ton of time in. And it's a spot where that's where the most opportunity is.
Andy, you spent a good amount of your career on the carrier side. Although the interesting thing is, I think you're now eclipsing that on the insurtech side. But you spent some real time on the carrier side. One of the things that I'd love to get kind of your take on is, tell me about what does change management at an insurance carrier look like?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I spent most of my career on the carrier side prior to coming to Snapsheet. Now I have, I guess, the luxury of spending all my time with almost every carrier. So yeah, I mean, I guess maybe the best way to talk about change management in an insurance carrier is sort of what something that senior executive at Travelers told me a long time ago, and he probably doesn't remember that he said this, but it's for some reason has stuck with me forever, is that once you know exactly what the right thing to do is, whether it's a strategy, whether it's a personnel decision, whether it's an org design decision, whether it's a technology decision, it usually takes 3 years to realize that change. And so 3 years from idea being everyone knows what the right thing to do is to execute it all the way through. So obviously it's a risk averse industry, maybe, which is interesting because the industry is all around taking risk. And at the same time, change happens really slowly across the industry. And our job is, companies like mine, like Snapsheet's job is to speed that up.
I'm curious, and I don't want to spend too much time on here because I could easily take us down a tangent on this, but I've seen the same quite a bit just in my years and most of my career has been on the insurtech side, working with carriers. And one of the things I'm curious about is AI is moving insanely fast. And I'm not necessarily trying to make this a pure, conversation on AI, because you could pop open any podcast and they're gonna have that same conversation. But do you think that those carriers that are going to continue to take 3 years to turn are going to be in trouble, or are they so big that they don't have to pivot at that pace?
I mean, I guess it depends on where the carrier starts with, right? The carriers that are in a position of strength, good distribution, good trading partners, good products, good pricing, good brand, good results are probably starting from a position of strength. So I would guess that they have more lead time. They also have more time to invest to get it right. I think if you're in a position of strength, you're going to be in a position of strength, and being maybe a very fast follower or hyper tester can be fine. But I think that AI is something that is a little bit unique because insurance industry proved that predictive models, whatever, you can argue about which ones work and what things don't, actually does work. And the faster and the better your models are, better results you're going to get. And I think that AI is kind of that, maybe on steroids, in the sense of the opportunities to, select better risks, to change the expense, burden of the insurance carrier, does present unique opportunities, or even acquire customers at a lower cost point. I think that the people that figure those things out, whether it's claims or underwriting or pricing, and can operationalize AI first, should have a significant lead, and that lead should be exponential even as the technology evolves, because it's like anything else. And the more you practice, the more you do, the better you're going to get. And so I think being early can't be a disadvantage in any respect.
I think that fast follow point is a good one. And this is, I think, now I've spent most of my career in insurance, so I'm biased, but this is definitely a fast follow industry. Once that first domino falls, you start to see everybody else jump in pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe like lemmings, maybe as the world is like, who's doing what? Well, I'm going to do it. But I think where this is unique is that every carrier is unique. How they deploy AI, where they deploy AI, most importantly, how they operationalize AI should be unique to what's the strategic driver for their business. And I don't think what's out there kind of in the, press release atmosphere, if you will, in terms of AI application is really even scratching the surface of some of the things that we're seeing that's not only possible, but actionable and operationalized and in existence today, particularly in the claim space. And, just as you think about that opportunity, I- it's just an opportunity cost lost. If you could have better quality and be 100% sure that you're compliant because of always on quality checking or early notification of claims that maybe not aren't going down the right path. And these types of features that are really discreet. It's not necessarily making a claims decision, for example, or an adjuster's decision, but it's certainly finding kind of an issue earlier, the needle in the haystack, and escalating it earlier, and that can be a huge advantage, not just from a service perspective, but an outcomes perspective.
Oh, it makes complete sense. Well, and that's what I'm excited to talk about today because you have as much experience on the claim side as probably anybody I know or have met. And Snapsheets works with over 180 carriers, TPAs, and MGAs. 16 of the top 20 PNC carriers. That might be the stat that impresses me more than anything else. 16 of the top 20, and then have also raised over $100 million in capital. So you've got the background on this. No, here's the thing I'm really curious about, right? And I've heard, of course, we hear a lot about straight through processing. If you go to ITC, there's 5 million, there's claims is everywhere, right? And I would say claims is really hot right now when it comes to the insurtech space.
When I joined Snapsheet, I remember this had to be 2017, late 2017, went to an event. Speaker went up, was talking about all the venture capital money pouring into insurance at the time. Insurtech had been coined maybe 12, 18 months before. And claims was 1% of the total. And I think Snapsheet was probably like 80% of that 1% that had been invested in insurtech. And so you're right. I think claims is hot now. I mean, look, it's 65, 70% of where all the dollars are in the ecosystem. And it's a place that is really challenging. So I think people avoided it. And I think now people can't avoid it.
Oh, I think you're dead on. 2 years ago at ITC is when I really started to see the buzz around claims, and then every year, each year, or I should say 3 years ago, then the past two ITCs, and I'm saying ITC, InsurTech Insights, InsurTech New York, it's all the same thing as far as like what I've seen. But essentially, that claims tech started. It just felt like it was the hottest one in the market. So I'm not surprised to hear those numbers.
Yeah. I mean, Snapsheet's the overnight success story that's 14 years old.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Snapsheet also had a service business that grew to be pretty extensive, and then has this big technology company. So like, it wasn't so much that Snapsheet was just creating something from nothing. It was pretty hard earned. If I know the story correctly, feel free to plug any holes there.
We think about it that Snapsheet is a technology business. We've been a pioneer in bringing, the latest and most modern technology into insurance since the company was founded. We started off pioneering and creating the virtual appraisal process. So I think that's really where a majority of the market is right now, because it never made sense to kind of follow the cable repair person model. Person comes to your house after you got in a car accident, kind of looks at the car from a couple different angles, and then leaves, writes you an estimate a couple days later after you waited a couple days for that person to get to your house, and then you take it to the body shop and get it repaired. So Snapsheet digitized that process, and really we were the first people to bring text messaging into the claims use case. We were first company to do digital payments via mobile experience in the PNC use case as well. So we are a tech company that has used technology to build multiple different products. We started on that appraisal side, and then about 6 years ago, 5, 6 years ago, we built out our core claim system, which is an end-to-end system of record that's built for really the modern world and the modern way that people should handle claims. So bringing all of these kind of analog processes, I mean, 25 years ago and today at many carriers, an adjuster is a switchboard operator, and they have a document management system, a text message system, an email system, a claims management system, maybe a separate financial system. They have notes, and it's kind of a mess, and they're plugging it all together. And we took what we built from the appraisal side and all of our lessons learned, really working alongside all of the carriers and looking at their claim system, and said, there's really a better way to do this, and built a system that brings all of that together and allows for the infrastructure to drive automation, straight through processing, operationalizing artificial intelligence um, into really discrete, use cases for all lines of insurance.
You made a comment when we were prepping for this episode that I thought was really interesting, and I'd love to dive into it. You mentioned that brokers and agents haven't paid enough attention to claims. What does that mean? Can you break that down?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, we've come out of a very hard market, right? The last couple of years, pricing's been rather robust across almost every line of insurance. And at the end of the day, all the loss costs, loss adjustment expense, if you add those together, like I said, it's 70 cents, 80 cents, 65 cents. Maybe it depends on the line a little bit. And the reality is the differentiator for the end customer is what happens when they get a loss. Sure, coverage is maybe mandated in some industries. Certainly personal lines is different than commercial lines. But at the end of the day, what drove this hard market, among other things, was inflation and loss costs going up. And the way to impact that the most is better claims operations. And the best carriers in the world have some of the best claims operations in the world in terms of best carrier results. And I think it's a spot where, the industry just hasn't looked at it. We've looked at how much rates gone up across every line each quarter. Largely across the space, loss adjustment expense has still been around 9, 10 and a half points, even though insurance premium is up probably 65, 70% over the last 3, 4 years. So if you think about that, loss adjustment expense we're not getting really any sort of improvement or scale on that. And the indemnity costs obviously are through the roof. So impacting claims outcomes is the biggest opportunity, and look, the large and best brokers and agents certainly have great risk management functions, but really focusing those risk management functions on their carriers, with their carriers, partnering with claims to get to better outcomes is not a spot that the industry spent a ton of time in. And it's a spot where that's where the most opportunity is.
What's that opportunity? And if I'm an agent, I'm a broker, what does that look like? How can I impact that?
Like I said before, a lot of the insurance carriers still run a very analog claims process. Maybe first notice of loss comes into one spot, and then it goes to another spot to set it up, and then it goes to another spot, and then it's finally assigned to an adjuster, and then the adjuster has to reach out and take another first notice of loss. Again, we're still at a very low amount of digital first notice of loss, which makes no sense. A lot of it's through email, certainly almost 90+% on the commercial side is through email. And that's just the beginning stages of it, but truly having an experience where when you file a claim, you're immediately identified who your adjuster is, what are the next steps, being able to submit information in an omni-channel fashion, text, email, documents, videos, all at the same time, being able to then action on that information, not just assign the right work to the right people, but assign it with context. If there's missing information, reaching out automatically and requesting it, following the compliance steps. If you have to, every time if you have to send policy language or, a homeowner's bill of rights in a particular state, like these things are all rules and data that can be automated. And these are the types of things that Snapsheet system and technology tackles really well, which is let's remove all of this, process and, multiple organizations, they have huge claims operations teams and dispatch teams. These are humans whose jobs are to do discrete pieces of the process so that other humans can do other parts of the jobs. Well, that can all be automated. I'm not even just talking AI rules, workflows, all of these work in a, symbiotic fashion to drive better outcomes. And what that ultimately leads to is more time to investigate, to understand coverage, to give strong customer service outcomes, next steps, direction to the policyholder. And obviously, this differs by line and jurisdiction. It needs to be done in a compliant fashion. But at the same time, there's so much that can be done to just improve the outcomes. And the longer there isn't a delay, the longer the severity could be, regardless of the type of claim. And any sort of mitigation efforts when you're weeks behind aren't as good as doing it as fast as possible. Speed tells the story.
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit. Is that not out of the control of the agent?
I think the agents can hold the carriers to a higher standard. Brokers can hold the carriers to a higher standard, largely around this. And ultimately, brokers and agents have the ability to vote with their feet, um, and where they place business around it. And we've been in a place where the industry where, like I said, rates increase, compounding double digits multiple years in a row across most lines, and frequency has been dropping. So maybe severity's up a little bit. It depends on the line there, but frequency's down. And so that should mean much better claim service, higher expectations on the claims, result. A lot of the lower dollar claims have been, moved out of the system, either because of higher deductibles or changes to terms and conditions, which the agents have sold through. So what's left is more complex claims. The agents and brokers can put a lot more pressure, I think, on the carriers and be stronger trading partners, both sides, just to get to better outcomes around it. I just think that the industry hasn't maybe focused enough on improving loss outcomes. They've obviously, every carrier's talked about expense, but all the money is in the loss outcomes. And I think that's where, whether it's around litigation, which everyone's been yelling about for years, and nuclear verdicts and social inflation, at the end of the day, one way to get around a lot of that is just better claim handling.
Well, and I think voting with your feet makes a lot of sense. And this is definitely, insurance, and especially insurance with agencies, is one of the bigger chicken and the egg problems ever. Like, it's always, how many agencies are asking this? Well, if you get more agencies to ask for it, we'll adopt this. Then you go to the agencies and they say, well, what carrier is adopting this? The carrier adopts this, then yeah, we're interested in doing this. Now, claims is a little bit different than a tool that affects the distribution. But one of the things that I'm curious on that is, okay, so I'm an agency, I'm a broker. Now, the largest brokers, that's going to be a little bit different, right? They have more leverage, they've got more insight into what's going on at a deeper level than the carrier, than, let's say, a Main Street agency. But if let's say agency does want to vote with their feet, how do they even know? What is it that, like, are there questions that they should be asking? Are there trigger events that they should be on the lookout for? What does that look like?
I think it's a great question, but if the agents are there selling through all these price increases and the loss results are good, and they're not looking at why they're placing with a specific carrier, then their customers are going to vote with their feet also. So I think it really starts with truly understanding the claims process, what the carrier is doing to actually return their insured back to pre-claim condition, whatever that may be, right? Or to make them whole in whatever way they can. And I think just having a better understanding of the process. I mean, the number of, agents that just fill out this form or go to this site and fill this out and say they're hands off, I think they can take a more active role in the claims process. And I think the best ones do around it. And that's some of that is just prepping the last piece is just prepping their insured with the right information. So, if the if the insured has a loss, preparing them with how to submit the claim, what's the right way to do it, how to get the carrier on the phone. But if the carrier is not someone who they should know, is the carrier best reached by phone or by email? What's their response time? What's the service level expectation around it? And it should differ depending on the line of insurance and certainly the severity of the claim. But if it's cat prone homeowners insurance, that's wildly different. What is the carrier's response mechanism if I'm in this geography and this geography gets it, and every policyholder in this geography gets it? And I think these are the things that agents can at least educate themselves on, but then also educate their insureds on.
Well, what I'm hearing you say is become experts on the claims process of these different carriers for as much as you can that's within your control, and then be able to educate and handhold, for lack of a better term, through that claims process with your insured.
And they should be able to use it as a way to sell value too, right? Like if, an agent, broker, regardless of the type of insurance, wants to make sure that when things happen, that they're not the ones doing all of the work associated with it as well. And so I think there's an opportunity to sell a ton of value by truly understanding that. And at least outlining the different options. Obviously, the insured can still make which decision that they want to go and what their true driver of the buying decision is. But in personal lines, people have a claim maybe 8 years or so, so they don't know what to do and they don't remember their last experience. Their last bad experience is their last experience, and that's what they remember. But if they don't have an experience, how do you walk them through that? And coverage has changed a lot too.
You made a point earlier and you said the best are already doing this. Do you have any more of those best practices that the best are doing? You mentioned that I love that example of, it's like, the best way to get in touch with this carrier. What are some of those other examples that the best are doing to separate themselves?
I think that the best carriers have a really strong claims operating model. And that's not a Frankenstein of different tools and widgets and things like that. It's truly an operating model that identifies how claims come in the door, what's the most efficient way to get the right information by line of business, how they assign out the work, how they triage the work, how they understand what information that they need to move to the right next steps, how they build resolution planning activities, how they do QA and compliance all together through the process versus kind of this kind of staged out, gated, people only know one piece of the process, and how they really drive different claims through a very complex Plinko board of how each claim is unique, and maybe each is a snowflake of their own, but how it drives claims through as information evolves and more information comes in to resolution. And I think the carriers that really spend a lot of time, really from a first principles perspective, and have really rethought how they want claims to flow through at different levels of severity based on geography, work routing, work assignment, all of these different, and how they develop over time, are really building a system, and it is a system, to make sure that they're doing, things can fall through the cracks. There could be bad experiences and along the way, but will 90+% follow a great experience because they've really wired this out. And many of our customers who are power users of our platform that have a true vision of how, for their line of business or their lines of business and for their policyholders, how they want to handle it, start from a place of not this is the way that we've always done it, but this is the way that we drive the claims to resolution. And everything is around getting to a resolution, which means it's going to be more efficient, which means they're going to control the outcomes and provide better service along the way. And it's amazing to me the number of carriers that you ask, well, what do you do today? We don't know. What do you want to do? We don't know. Um, why do you do it that way? We've always done it that way. Well, why do you do it that way? And I think there's so much has changed and so little focus and change has been put on the claims kind of operating model. And that's really what Snapsheet does and what our platform does. It's not just a tool. It's really helping carriers change the way that they handle and manage claims in their organization.
What are some specific questions an agent or broker can ask their carrier to see are they handling claims in the best way possible?
Well, I mean, start just what's your loss adjustment expense or what's my claim load, right? I mean, let's say if you're a self-insured, I mean, go to the commercial use case. Let's say you're between a guaranteed cost market or self-insured kind of captive type market around it, and maybe there's a claims load that's tied to it, and it's maybe like 4% a year, and my price is going up 12 to 15% a year. Well, then my cost of claims is going up, but my frequency is going down, and the value equation seems off. Why am I spending more money for fewer claims? That seems out of whack. So, starting with just the loss adjustment expense that's associated with it, and what are you investing in to change that? What are the things that you're doing to drive, depending on the line of insurance, to drive better results on indemnity, right? What are you doing to drive quick resolution? What percentage of your claims get to first payment and what time frame? Just kind of basic blocking and tackling questions around it that can kind of lock in towards the service level. And then maybe most importantly, how are you using technology to get to a better outcome, right? There's so many products and solutions and features out there, and claims has been woefully underinvested in. I mean, all the money, just like I was making the joke earlier, where all the money in the venture world went into distribution, carriers have so much to invest in distribution in the last couple of years, rate, rule, form, product pricing, all of those types of things. Claims has always been kind of the afterthought in the technology side of the equation. And I think now as the market's softening, right, and carriers can't get to the target combined ratios that they want to get to on just price increase alone because it's going to be more competitive. The next step is what are they doing to drive and bend that cost equation on the claim side?
Do you have an example of a carrier right now that is crushing it in this regard? So basically they answer all those questions. This is the one where like they're crushing it. And here's their process.
Give you a couple examples. Claim comes in the door, available to report first notice of loss in an omni-channel fashion, able to append documents, photos, video, voice recordings, all immediately at kind of first notice of loss. As it comes in, the system's scanning for what's not there. It's automatically reaching out via the preferred mechanism of communication, text, email. It says, hey, I see you submitted this claim and you missed these things. Can you please send me this? Or do you have pictures of this? Or can you take a video of this? Because we know it's kind of down this path. It's a water claim, as an example, but you didn't submit any of this. It's an auto claim and you didn't submit pictures of the damage of the other party, whatever it is. Automatically identifying that immediately as soon as that comes, identifying here's your adjuster, here's the next steps, here's their contact information. As the adjuster opens up and looks at it, and maybe their first step is to confirm coverage and understand it, there's information and insight already gleaned from the report in terms of what are the next steps that they need to do and information that they need to check. Maybe it's make sure that the underwriting company is right. Maybe it's to review coverage to make sure there's not the deductibles right, things like that. Automatically sending it out to a vendor for fulfillment. Think about a water claim and immediately coming in and immediately getting assigned out to a vendor to say, hey, let's do water mitigation, right? Or quick strike in a commercial trucking claim. We have carriers that are doing these things where it's automatic. So as soon as it comes in, there's automatic vendors being assigned to it. So they're starting their scheduling process even before the adjusters even picked up the file. So you're shrinking the elapsed time. Automated letters, and whether it's regulatory and compliance letters, like I was mentioning, like sending out, okay, here's the policy language that's required in this state immediately around its file. So the adjuster doesn't have to. So it's taking work off the adjuster's plate so that as the adjuster picks up the file and maybe they're making their first contact, it's alerting to the adjuster to the service levels around that. Maybe they say they want to have first contact within 4 hours. So the system starts counting down and elevating that claim in their queue so that they're making and getting to that customer immediately or that policyholder immediately, having that conversation. That conversation is fully recorded. All the documents are coming out into that. And then even getting into some of the AI pieces where the system's always checking, is there new information? Is there been new communications? Has there been new documentation? Do we need to create alerts on this? Did we miss, is there a regulatory or compliance or a time limit that's coming up that we need to be aware of, and elevating those things? Even as an invoice or bill or police report comes in, we have carriers that are the systems identifying that. And then instead of the adjuster having to look at a document like a police report and saying, hey, look, there's another party on this police report and I have their name and their address and what they are. Now, as an adjuster, instead of going in and typing in all this information, the system can say, hey, there's another party on this police report. Click a button. Boom. It's immediately added to the claim file, kicks off those workflows to reach out to that third party. So truly operationalizing automation, workflow, AI, operationalizing these processes, whether it's communication, whether it's engagement, whether it's investigation activities, whether it's vendor assignment, vendor engagement activities, vendor follow-up activities. The best carriers have automated these things. So it's really changing the way, and that's what Snapsheet's enabling, is changing the way the adjusters adjust so that they are really able to spend the time on the things that matter, whether it's service, whether it's actual decision making, and not on this administrative kind of analog switchboard operator work. And that allows them to spend more time making better decisions and then surfacing things that have issues or could have issues down the road because of lack of information or just adjuster neglect or fatigue.
One, that's a great breakdown. I appreciate you doing that. Two, if an agency wants to take a more proactive role within a claims process, where in that process do they insert themselves, or do they not?
I mean, I think it just depends on what their investment is, right? Um, well, first of all, there's multiple models, right, around it. So, agent broker can set up their own claim handling, their claim advocacy groups, and their own claim kind of organizations. They can take a more active role in these things. They can take the pressure off the insured and policyholder. They can do it for a fee. There's a ton of different models that they could follow on it. I think it's figuring out what they believe their role is. You know, I think it's a true stat still. We used to always talk about it, CNA and Travelers when I worked there. I think something like 85-90% of all business and agency is placed with 3 carriers, right? So typically they have 3 markets that are handling most of their risks. So think of most of their frequency. What's left, maybe one off or more complex or have some level of hair on it. I think if that's the case, really understanding the claims operating model and how they work and having direct lines into it to help support their policyholders. And in terms of what those models are, I think it depends on who are the markets they work with and the carriers that they work with. And then really looking at, what carriers are driving a different claims experience, if that's important to their policyholders, right? And I think in the last couple of years, it's been the cost of insurance that folks have focused on. I think the cost is, I'm not going to say it's going to become a commodity, but the pricing should become more clean as it's more competitive in a softer market. And if that's the case, I think it puts a lot more pressure on the claims side and service. And if the agent's not helping the insured and the insured has a bad experience, that's a broker of record waiting, right? And they don't want to be harmed.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. The soft market dynamics are going to change quite a bit here
And I
over
don't
these
think
next,
people remember soft market.
which it wasn't that long ago, which is the craziest part. But yeah, it feels
We have
like this
short
hard
memory in
markets.
this industry.
Yeah, 100%. So, Andy, last question I have for you here is we're sitting here 10 years from now. What does this process look like? What are you doing in this world?
I mean, look, the claims environment has not changed in 25 years by and large, right? And for a lack of maybe focus, for a lack of investment, probably not. People spent a lot of money. I don't think they've gotten a lot for it. Maybe an example, the chief claims officer is a great chief claims officer. She said this at an event a while back and it stuck with me. She started her career as a field adjuster and she'd had to drive out and she would go into a house. She'd have to blueprint and do graph paper, all the damage of a homeowner's claim by hand and had no technology. And she did 4 a day. And now we have all this technology and a lot of this stuff is automated today. And a field adjuster still does 4 a day today. So it's not just the technology. So, what I said earlier is the best answer to this question is we're going to go through a huge technological switch. It used to be that the work or the technology we had at work was significantly further advanced than what we have at home. And now we have smart TVs, smartphones, and AI assistants, and chatbots, and all of these things at home. And most people don't have any of this stuff at work. And it's mainframe technology. It's 20 years. It's a 5-year implementation. It's hundreds of millions and tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. And they get nothing except the same train tracks that they were on, maybe a little bit better UI and no better data. And that's the technology has advanced so far. The industry's got to catch up now. And modern technology platforms like Snapsheet allow these carriers to jump ahead and really change the way that they adjust. So instead of being the switchboard operator and doing all this analog, essentially administrative work where they're in their email box and pasting stuff and downloading files and uploading, all that stuff is going to be done by the system. And so you're going to have really expert adjusters who are making decisions or supporting their insured policyholders through a really complex loss. And they're able to spend more time on that. They're not pushing paper around it. And a lot of this stuff just happens. I mean, just even the concept of setting an initial reserve, that's a manual process and people forget to do it, things like that. The system can set a reserve based on the loss type, the peril, the line of business, all these different factors. And that can automatically be done as a starting point and the adjuster can approve it, right? And so moving from a world where they're keying in information to truly approving it and making decisions and moving to not just an auditor and a QA role, but truly the knowledge role that a lot of these adjusters want to play and taking all this administrative garbage out of the process because of bad systems is where the industry is going to be. And I don't think it's 10 years away. We have carriers that are partners of ours that are doing this today, and they have roadmaps to accelerate it each week, each month, each quarter, each year. And that's what the best carriers are doing. Last point on this, all these carriers talk about, oh, we're going through a modernization. It's like, well, what? You went through a transformation 7 years ago, and now you're going through a modernization. And that's like, wait, that's just shifting like from on premises to the cloud. That's not like a modernization. Like if I remodel my house, that means I have new stuff. Maybe the closet's bigger. Maybe I have new, systems. Like you're not even getting any new stuff. So like for us, it's truly like, how do you get to a world that's versionless? How do you get out of these projects? How do you get out of this? Oh, it's an implementation. No, business users, these claims leaders are the technologists. Now they're driving changes to the process. The workflow changes. If you have a cat come in a place that you weren't expecting, how do you flip a switch and immediately have that operating model just work? And that's what our best carriers, and that's what the best carriers are doing. They're moving from these like 3-year and 5-year projects to these kind of living operating models that are every week, month, quarter, year, getting better and advancing discrete components of the end-to-end claims lifecycle to drive better decisioning and better outcomes. And I don't think carriers can wait. There's dozens of top 100 carriers that are on systems that are 10, 15 years old. We don't even let our laptops go 3 years anymore. How can you have a system that's 15, 20 years old?
And I think it's going to be interesting and it's going to be a lot of pain to get to that point. But at
It
that
doesn't have to be.
point,
It doesn't have to
doesn't
be.
have to be, but it probably will be.
Look, change is hard. I said it at the beginning, right? Once you know what the right answer is, it takes 3 years to get there. Like I'm not diminishing the change, but it's like, when is the time, right? Like it wasn't the last 15 years. It wasn't when we're getting 12, 15 points a rate year over year over year. I think the time is now, and that's why you're seeing claims becoming more of a focus, because ultimately it has to be. I remember maybe the last story is, remember talking to a very senior executive at a very large TPA. This was 5, 6 years ago, and saying, "Yeah, our business isn't the business of efficiency." And then I said to him at the time, I said, your business may not be the business of efficiency right now, because your competitors aren't focused on being efficient, but there'll be a point in time where the model is about being efficient and really good at claim handling. And then someone's going to be on your corner and take your business. And so I think that's kind of the world where, sure, it starts up front, distribution, pricing, because that's a pure arms race. But I think that arms race has to come to the back of the house as well. And that's where claims sits.
Yeah. No question. And I think it is definitely going to be a competitive advantage to those carriers, 100%. And the brokers, to be honest. But Andy, this has been great, man. I appreciate you coming on and walking us through this. I think it's a super interesting topic, and it's going to be interesting for the next couple of years at least. That is for sure.
It's been an interesting last several years, so I have no doubt that it'll be interesting going forward. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.